I've been working with Jim Mellon for 15 years now. I've primarily focused on early stage direct investments in the field of biotech and pharma. But in the context of Jim's family office. So because of that biotech experience that we've had, we decided to focus in the alternative protein space on the companies that have biotech characteristics, defensible intellectual property, and know-how. So these have very robust business models into the future.
And what's your background that you brought to this?
I'm a chartered financial analyst by training, economics and finance. Started my career at ANZ in Australia.
Splendid. Well, off you go, Dave.
Thank you. So as you know, Agronomics is a London-listed investment company focused on the nascent field but rapidly advancing field of cellular agriculture. We have a portfolio of 21 companies today that all have technologies that have the potential to create a step change in the efficiency of production of things which we've historically derived from animals. This is a unique vehicle. There's almost no other way that public market or private market investors can get exposure to this field. And as you heard from Jim, we think that this is one of the most exciting economic opportunities of our time, but also ESG opportunities. It has implications for greenhouse gas emissions, ocean health, animal welfare, but even the prevention of future pandemics. So the three opportunity sets that we focus on at Agronomics are cell culture. This is where you take a sample of cells from an animal, a cow, a pig, a chicken, a bluefin tuna, a lobster. You isolate the relevant cells, you provide them the nutrients and the environment that they need to grow, and then you end up with a biomass of cells. But then the trick is to get them to turn into the specialized cell type that you want. In the case of meat, this is muscle and fat primarily. In the case of leather, it's fibroblasts, and you get those fibroblasts to form collagen. But materials aside, in leather, this is where you consume the entire cell. Precision fermentation, this is the second opportunity. This is where you take a single-celled organism, a microbe, you encode it with the relevant code for the protein that you want that organism to produce. And then the organism consumes sugars and organizes those sugars into much more complex molecules, proteins. This is relevant for the production of dairy proteins. A company that is in our portfolio called Onigo is producing albumin, which is the key protein that you find in egg whites using this technology, and has many other applications. This is a slightly more advanced technology than the cell culture, with products already on the market, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then finally, we are investing, although we haven't made an investment yet, we are looking very keenly at the enabling technologies for both of these fields, the picks and shovels. A little bit of timeline of this industry, because it is so new. In 2013, the world's first proof of concept burger was produced. It cost 250,000 euros. It was produced by Professor Mark Post at Maastricht University, and it was actually served live on BBC here in London. It didn't taste brilliant. There was no fat content, but things have moved on substantially since then. And today, Mosa Meat, the company which was the research project was spun out into the company called Mosa Meat. The company claims that they can produce a beef patty at a price point of about €9, which is still 20 to 30 times more expensive than it needs to be competitive on supermarket shelves, but nonetheless a very rapid price reduction, and the trajectory is only going in one direction. So on the precision fermentation side, 2019 we saw the first product approved, which was Perfect Days whey protein. Now you can walk into Starbucks in Seattle and you can buy a coffee with this milk product that that didn't involve animals in its production. And it was in December 2020 that Singapore approved the first cultivated meat product. This is a chicken nugget. It is somewhat controversial because this product continues to use an input called fetal bovine serum, but nonetheless, this is a landmark event for the industry, and we very much anticipate that this year cultivated meat and seafood products are going to be approved in the US by the FDA, as well as the USDA. So everyone appreciates that the global population is growing, and that's led to a significant increase in the consumption of meat. But what has really taken animal husbandry to such a large industry is the increase in per capita meat consumption. In the US, from a relatively high base, we've seen a 30% increase over the last 60 or so years. But in China, and this trend is broadly reflected across emerging markets as they've experienced increasing prosperity, we witnessed a 16-fold increase in per capita meat consumption. And so that is why animal husbandry today, depending on the estimate, accounts for somewhere between 18 and 25% of all greenhouse gas emissions. And the list goes on of how burdensome this is to the natural environment. 50% of all fresh water that humans use goes into animal husbandry. That includes the water that goes to water the crops that are then fed to the animals. And it's the case that 70% of all crops which we grow are not for direct human consumption. They get funneled into animals in a very inefficient cycle where those animals convert those calories of feed into calories of flesh. A chicken is the most efficient, broadly consumed animal. It has a calorie conversion ratio of 9-1, but a cow has a calorie conversion ratio north of 25-1. So you have this huge loss of calories, and if everyone went vegetarian tomorrow, it would be easy to feed the world's population sustainably, but that is just not going to happen. Excuse me. In addition to the environmental burden, there are significant concerns over animal welfare. Approximately 80 billion animals are slaughtered every year to feed our population, 2 trillion fish. And the perverse thing about the fish is that many of these, a very significant proportion, are ground up and fed back to fish in fish farms. Today, 53% of seafood that we consume is derived from fish farms, not from the oceans. And in fact, ocean peak productivity for seafood was back in 1995. All the incremental growth in the production of seafood has been from fish farms. The fish are kept in such close quarters, just as the chickens, the cows, the pigs are, that they need to be prophylactically dosed with antibiotics. And 80% of all antibiotics, which are medically important for humans, are fed to animals. And this is a major driver of antimicrobial resistance and superbugs. And if we're still, unfortunately, living through a viral pandemic, but if we have a bacterial pandemic without antibiotics that work, then we've got a much more serious problem on our hands. The Black Death is an example of a bacterial pandemic. 1/3 of the world's population was wiped out, 2/3 of Europe, and that was without international air travel and densely populated cities. So you certainly would be adhering to your social distancing rules if that is something that transpired. In terms of land, excuse me, land use attributed to protein production through animals, if the US were to produce its protein requirements using cell culture and precision fermentation, we have the possibility of freeing up approximately 600 million acres of land. That's about 1/3 the total land mass of the US. That could be used for other productive purposes, carbon sequestration, who knows, but we wouldn't need to dedicate all of that land. And here, this just gives you some sense of how much more efficient the production of meat using this technology is. We see a 97% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, 96% reduction in land use, water, energy. A lot of people talk about energy and how this is going to be a very energy intensive industry, but only 3.3% of total energy consumption in Europe is attributable to agriculture, and that's the whole of agriculture. So even a 50% reduction is not that meaningful, given that it's such a small percentage. Anyway, so in response to this growing awareness around how damaging animal husbandry is to the natural environment, we've witnessed the rise of conscious consumption. This has been, the path has been paved by the plant-based alternative proteins, which have seen pretty significant uptake. And the best example of this is about 10 years ago, you could walk into Starbucks and you would be offered maybe skim milk and normal milk. Today, you can't walk into Starbucks and not be offered 3 or 4 different types of milk. and the market share of those alternative milks in the US has increased from about, or less than 1% to about 15% today. That disruption has caused the two largest dairy producers in the US already to go bust because they have such large infrastructure. They have very significant difficulty downsizing with that disruption. Excuse me. But we think that the much bigger second wave of innovation that's coming over the plant-based alternative proteins is the the cell-based meats, the precision fermentation proteins, and the Good Food Institute here in the top. Does that work? Anyway, the Good Food Institute is the leading non-profit proponent of these technologies. And it has done a lot of work around the consumer take-up of these products. You can see here that 1,000 people were surveyed in each of the US, China, and India, and the propensity to buy these products on a regular basis under hypothetical circumstances, the cell-based products are roughly in line with the plant-based. For cultural reasons, I suppose in the US it's a little bit lower. Around 1/3 of respondents said that they'd be willing to buy these products regularly, but 2/3 in China and India or thereabouts. So things are looking positive, and I would say that as familiarity grows of these products, I think those, just as with genetic modification, people are going to become more and more comfortable with these products. So Mosa Meat, Upside Foods, these were the first two companies that were formed in 2016. In the first 4 years of existence of this industry, only $150 million went into this sector. Agronomics started investing in 2018 when less than $50 million had gone in. And since then, we've seen a very, very rapid increase in the amount of capital flowing in. 2020 saw $270 million, so an 80% uptick on the prior 4 years combined. And 2021, approximately $1.1 billion. So the trajectory is obvious that large institutional investors are starting to take this very seriously because the technology has been de-risked to the point that they're willing to write very significant checks. And we're seeing, aside from the protein companies like Cargill and Tyson, their corporate venture arms, we're seeing Temasek, the Singaporean Sovereign Wealth Fund, SoftBank, CPPIB, EQT Ventures out of Sweden, and a number of other Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds starting to deploy capital here. It's a similar story for the precision fermentation companies, but in total, across the 200 companies in our universe, those three verticals, cell culture, precision fermentation, and enabling technologies, still only about $3.5 billion has gone into this sector. But the Good Food Institute estimates that to meet just 10% of the world's protein production requirements is going to require a $1.8 trillion capital investment. So we are at the beginning of a multi-decade, multi-trillion dollar run of capital into this sector, and Agronomics is absolutely the outright leader in this field. To give you some sense of the size of the markets that we are disrupting, meat is a $1.8 trillion industry, seafood, $300 or $400 billion, luxury leather goods is 300, dairy is a $700 billion industry. And here you have an estimate from some forecasts from A.T. Kearney that 35% of the industry is going to be, 35% of meat production is going to be through cell culture by 2040. So very promising path ahead. I mentioned that there are products approved in Singapore. The chicken nugget is approved. There are not yet any cell cultured products approved in the US, but the USDA and the FDA have spoken very positively about this sector. We have seen the correspondence between our portfolio companies and these agencies. It is getting dangerously close. I can't tell you exactly when it's going to happen, but very, very likely it is going to be this year, and that is going to be a major moment for this industry. Our shares, Agronomics share price was up 20% on the day that Eat Just's product was approved in Singapore. That is a population of 5 million people. The US is a population of 300. So I think there are very exciting times ahead. The EU, unfortunately, is from a European Food Standards Authority perspective, is being a little bit slow here. Japan is likely to come after the US, and then, but the UK has an opportunity to show some leadership here as well. And Agronomics is a founding member of APA, the Alternative Protein Association. We were at the Houses of Parliament on Tuesday, speaking to the government about ways that we can move this forward with the British food regulators. I will just go on here. This is our portfolio. We have raised £130 million so far. These are pretty capital hungry businesses, so we are going to need to raise more money, although we are not going to be raising money at earliest until late this year, if not early next year. But this portfolio was put together hopefully with significant thought, in the sense that we now cover off every major protein category that there is: beef, pork, chicken, seafood, including bluefin tuna, lobster, prawns. We have dairy proteins, egg proteins, collagen. But I think even 2 years ago, I didn't appreciate the breadth of disruption that was coming to conventional agriculture. This is absolutely vast, and now we're beginning to see companies working on plant-based cell culture as well. We have a company called California Cultured, which is producing cocoa in a bioreactor. I tasted that for the first time just this week in our office. We also have Gailey, which is producing cotton, which is hugely water consumptive. Just by the way, my colleague Laura here and Hamoud, but Laura was in Tel Aviv with me in June. We both ate the chicken burger produced by Supermeats. I can honestly tell you that if you gave me a conventional chicken burger alongside that, I don't think I'd be able to tell the difference. And Supermeat also served their protein or their chicken in a blind tasting to culinary experts, and they were unable to tell the difference either. And that is not surprising at all to me. We have about £55 million of cash. Our market cap is around 170, 180 million pounds. We are, just to reiterate, we're the only way that you can get exposure to this very exciting field. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. That's really fascinating. And it clearly is a growth industry. We've got time for a couple of questions. I don't know whether if we have a question from the audience, whether that we've got a kind of mic for them or not, but has anybody got a question they want to put to Anthony at this point? Or he was stunned into silence. Okay.
Oh, you got the microphone.
How fast in the next 10 years do you think this will take over the conventional way that we eat food?
The next 10 years, well, I think within 10 years we're going to see it on supermarket shelves. It's probably, from a price parity perspective, is a more relevant thing, and I would say that our estimates are that within 5 to 10 years, depending on protein type, you're going to see price parity. You're going to have bluefin tuna at the front end of the curve, 5 years to get to cost parity, because it's a protein that you can't farm. But at the back end, you're going to have chicken. So look, this industry is going to be supply constrained for, as far as the eye can see. The first full-scale commercial facilities that are being contemplated by these companies are looking to produce 5 tons of meat per day. That sounds like a lot of meat. That's about 0.5% of London's daily requirement. So supply constrained for a very, very long time.
Thank you.
Hi, Anthony. What's the exit strategy for some of the holdings, or all of the holdings that you have, and how soon will some of these companies come to market themselves?
Sure. So, I mean, the products are going to be approved this year in the US, right? The meat and the seafood products. The Every company already has its egg protein on the market. And leather, for example, it's not burdened by the same regulation of the food because you don't eat it. And Vitro has a commercial supply agreement with one of the world's largest fashion houses. Watch this space for an announcement around that. Look, we speculate that these companies are going to become very attractive acquisition targets for large food companies. When this technology is proven to be stable and cash flow generative, we think that the food companies are going to buy them. I think there'll be a handful of companies that sort of go it on their own and IPO. Within our portfolio, I think realistically the earliest IPO we could expect is probably 3, maybe 4 years away. They're still early stage, but valuations are going to be increasing pretty quickly in the near term, and that will be reflected in uplifts in our net asset value.
Perhaps I might ask a question too, which is what is your relationship with these portfolio companies? How active are you in helping them?
Very active.
And what kind of stakes do you have in them?
Our stakes range from 5% to 20%. I sit on the board of 5 companies. I'm a board observer of another 3. So almost half I have direct access to board materials, etc. And then even the others, we're very active in trying to help our companies in any way that we can.
And do you have any compelling data about how attitudes are changing? Is it you mentioned the millennials, but is the issue of taste still a problem in terms of the growth acceptance of this kind of product in future?
Is taste the problem?
Yeah. Is it taste the problem, or is it?
Well, I can tell you that the taste is not the problem. The cells taste exactly as you would expect them. So I've had chicken, I've had pork. I'm going to enjoy Onago's egg meringue later today. It's the texture that is, in reality, a little bit more of a challenge. There is only one company that is working to grow a fillet steak, and the reason that there's only one company is because it's a pretty challenging thing to do. But there are other ways that texture can be created in food, so we're pretty positive on that.
Any more questions out there? Yep. A couple over here.
Hi, Anthony. I accept it may be hard for you to say, but do you envisage you'll be investing most of the, I think, 55 million cash between now and the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, we are being, given the funding environment for early stage companies is not great at the moment, we're in a really strong position. So we're not in a desperate rush to get that out the door, but we certainly have a full pipeline and we could deploy that if we so chose on the right terms. Yeah.
Hi there. Forgive my naivety, but I've just joined. I'm not really too familiar with this area. But I wanted to know, what's the safety precautions that have been taken during the testing, the trials? What sort of length of time have these trials taken place? Because this is obviously, it's a relatively new area. So yeah, my concerns are a little bit around the safety concerns around it. Have you done like long-term trials? Or how has that taken place?
These products don't undergo trials in the same way that you would expect human therapeutics to undergo with the FDA. Look, the reality is that the FDA scientists have very, very sensitive instruments that can measure the chemicals, the proteins that are in these products, and these are nutritionally identical to conventional meat and dairy products. So, look, as I keep saying, the FDA has already approved the sale of the dairy and the egg proteins, and it is just a matter of time, short time I should think, that they approve the meat and seafood products. It's just worth pointing out, on the seafood side, the seafood produced using this technology will not be exposed to microplastics, will not have the bioaccumulation of heavy metals and toxins, so that is actually likely to be a healthier product than the fish that you catch swimming in whatever they're swimming in.